Thank you guys for joining me for another episode of the Wealthy Practitioner Podcast. Today, I have my good friend Ryan Drake coming at you from Australia. I convinced Ryan, what time is it there?
7:30, 7:40, yeah.
Okay, that's not as bad as I thought it was. So,
Nice.
anytime Ryan and I are jamming on anything, it's the weirdest times of day because we're in such different time zones. But I love Ryan. I met Ryan through a mastermind that we were both a part of. And immediately we hit it off. We have similar interests, similar values, and we have just been geeking out on consulting since then. I convinced Ryan to come on and be a guest because I think he has an insane amount of wisdom that he can share with you guys. And I can't even tell you all the cool stuff he does because I don't even know. Most of the times when we're having conversations, he's just so smart and my head hurts after we talk because I'm like, Ryan, I don't even know what you're talking about. I will let him introduce himself and tell you guys a little bit about himself. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Steph, for having me. And yes, I remember our bonding experience at the airport in Nashville where you were helping me experience Chick-fil-A for the first time.
Yeah, Ryan
Before we
was
caught
like,
our
I
flight.
don't think I've had Chick-fil-A. And I was like, what? You were in the States. You were absolutely going to have Chick-fil-A right now at this Nashville airport.
It was so good. Yeah, oh my goodness. So this question is always very interesting because I feel like we're ever evolving. I guess primarily what I do is business consultancy. So I work with health and wellness brands, businesses that are service based here in Australia and internationally, help to grow and scale smarter with systems without the struggle or stress. So essentially taking the business owner but who operates as an operator out of the day to day so that they're freed up and have more time with their loved ones and family and scale team and all that kind of fun stuff. And the beautiful thing that I love to do with clients then is get into the nitty gritty of what is and isn't working within their business. Often our business problems are not business problems.
Totally.
So that's the fun stuff. I love diving into that bit.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I think that I was like, Ryan, we're going to jam on this. And he was like, cool. How's your mindset and your self worth? And I was like, no, we're not going to talk about that. What we're going to talk about is this new offer that I'm going to do. And he's like, no, we're not, Steph. We're going to start at the beginning. And I was like, I don't really want to do that. But I think that you particularly, I want to get a little bit into your journey a little bit later on about how you came to be in entrepreneurship and what that looked like. But I also just want to talk about the fact that I think you have such an amazing insight into self-worth, and it's a unique insight, and I think you're able to expel things from people that they don't know that they're holding on to just with your thought-provoking questions and your own journey with kind of that self-worth and confidence and how you've navigated that. So what has made you so passionate about wanting to explore that realm with clients?
Oh, great question. So I think there's two parts. And the first part is probably like the first half of my life where I watched my older brother, who's 14 years older than me, go through a lot of challenges around alcohol abuse and a raft of different things that impacted him. He was on the trajectory to play for the Australian national soccer team, and he was really, really good. And I remember watching him with thousands of people supporting and cheering his name, and I was fangirling about my
Yeah.
own brother. And then just to see him through his career away through poor decision making, and to see how that impacted my family, but unconsciously at the time, just absorbing and observing what was happening. Didn't understand the full impact of all of that until I was a lot older.
Mm-hmm.
And witnessing how my parents continued to love him through everything, even if he caused pain, and witnessing the parental love that we can have beyond just transactional
Mm-hmm.
exchange, which I think a lot of modern day relationships are about. If
So, like,
if you
yeah.
do this, then I'm going to love you.
Yeah, if you're good, I'll love you. And if you do what I think you should do, then I'll love you and I'll give you praise. But the minute you act out, then forget it.
Exactly. And that happens in friendships and all of that. So I think that played a critical role in my coaching later on, just in terms of the lessons and learnings from that. And then secondly was my very first heartache breakup in high school, and just recognizing how my perception of self was completely on the floor. So as an 18-year-old, this beautiful relationship where you kind of romanticize it all, and it's the puppy love, and you think your high school sweetheart's you're gonna marry
The
them.
one, yep.
The one, exactly right. And so I got to the end of this relationship and thinking, oh my goodness, all of my self-worth, all of my identity was actually tied up in how this one single individual viewed me.
Mm-hmm.
And it was exhausting too, because it meant that I was constantly trying to prove myself to be valuable and lovable and kind and all those things. But it was a front to disguise the insecurities of, if I wasn't good enough, then she wouldn't like me.
Totally.
So I got to the end of that, and essentially I was asking myself the question, how do I never ever feel like this again? And that took me down the PD path of personal development, of reading every single book I could get my hands on, from business to spirituality to politics, economics, all of this, and trying to understand, how did the greats of their field think and behave.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the most fascinating thing for me was that the business leaders and how they spoke about business, the principles were very much the same as the great spiritual leaders and gurus and yogis and all of these individuals. And so there's this timeless wisdom that I consistently found through each different pillar that I was studying at the time. It's like, wow, okay, there's meat here to apply to my life. But my journey actually started with pickup. And that was the interesting kind of red pill into personal development, understanding NLP and mindset. And it got to the point where I was reading all this stuff about personal development and growth for men, about how to pick up women and how to relate to them. And once it felt like it was emotional manipulation, that is when I checked out and I stopped. I said, I don't want to go any further.
Yeah, manipulate the situation.
Yes.
Yeah, I think you are. I don't even know if you would like kill a fly. You are like one of the most kind-hearted people I know, and you operate from a very distinct values. I feel like you don't waver on them. It's not like one day you feel one way and the next day you feel another way. You're constantly evolving, sure, just in the short amount of time I've known you, but you are able to take information from all sides and decipher what really aligns with you. And so I can imagine how that wasn't something that aligned with you. What do you feel like has been your journey with like discovering this identity and who Ryan Drake is?
Oh, that's a great question. I think um, the way I look at this is, if we can have mental freedom, then we are truly free. And what I mean by that is, if anyone's read The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, he makes this point, you're not your thoughts. You're the observer of your thoughts. Now, intellectually, we can understand that to a degree. In the moment of a feeling, in the moment of experiencing something, we don't feel like we're the observer of the thoughts. We feel like we're in the emotion of anger, frustration. We self-identify as Ryan or as Steph. And
Mm-hmm.
then we have all these things that we find to create that sense of self. But actually, all that we have is the observation. So a lot of my work around understanding more of how I'm expressed in the world comes back to, if I'm feeling a particular way, can I recognize that I'm not the feeling, I'm not the thought, I'm not the thing in it, I'm actually the observer, which gives me immense power over my emotions over a situation, if I can recognize my body is feeling and reacting to data or stimuli from the environment that isn't conducive to a positive result that I'm after, and not to say that feelings or any of that stuff is bad either, just recognizing it and saying, okay, well, I feel sad.
Mm-hmm. I think in entrepreneurship, it's a lot of like anxious feelings, right? Like,
Mm.
when I work with clients, it's like, I don't feel like I'm doing enough, or I don't know what the next thing is. And it's like, well, if you can just observe, you're having this feeling at this moment in time, or a client falls off, especially when you're starting up and a client falls off,
Mhm.
no matter what industry you're in, like that is usually pretty triggering because we care about our work. We care about what we're doing. I can even think back to when my first patient like discontinued care and didn't want to see me anymore. I was like, oh, what did I do? Oh my God, everything I did was wrong, but if it was just like stopping, pausing, and acknowledging that feeling of like, you're feeling anxious because of this, but that doesn't mean you have to live there.
1000%. And the faster we can get at recognizing we can come out of that space to observe, that's when we actually have real presence. That's when we're really connected to what is happening. And in that moment, we can recognize, cool, this is or isn't serving me. And rather than go into a shame spiral or this woe is me feeling,
Mm-hmm.
which can just be quite detrimental, and then the thoughts spiral, and we really identify with those thoughts. If we can recognize, actually, hold on, why am I feeling this way? What have I made it mean that this client has left my practice?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I've made it mean that I'm somehow bad.
Mm-hmm.
When in fact, if I take a step back from the situation, that client's moved on. That client's moved address. That client,
Right.
I've done such a good job that client's not in pain anymore.
Right.
Of
Right.
course, they don't they don't need to come back.
Right.
Um, and so we get access to a lot more power in recognizing that, yeah, we're the observer. So for me, there's lots of beautiful things that I can say are apparent in my life right now. And because of how I grew up and what I've seen, I'm also okay with all of that disappearing.
Totally.
I'm not
Because your
attached to,
identity is not associated to the things, people, or places that you currently are experiencing in your life.
no,
And that's a
correct.
really powerful place to be. And I think that that's not the case for most people, right? I think that the reality is that most of us attach our identity to these outside forces.
Which becomes a trap.
Totally, because you're always going to be willing, you're always going to be disappointed, you're always going to be let down, you're always going to think that there's something wrong with you if you're allowing that power of an outside force to dictate your worth.
Spot on. And what's fascinating then is actually distinguishing between the things that you do want for your life and the things that you are stuck on because of the perception of would how others would perceive you. So
I'm I'm
yeah.
so glad you brought that up because I feel like that could be a whole podcast episode in itself. I was just doing a onboarding call with one of my immersion clients, one of my one-to-one clients, and that is what we discussed. She's so close to having $1 million practice, and there's a couple things in there that we could improve that would get her closer. But I just asked her, why do you want $1 million practice? Is it because everybody says that you should have one? Is it because then you get to wear a belt that says 1 million on it, and like you get to say when you're at the next conference, like, yeah, I have $1 million practice. Like, what is it that's actually making you want to have $1 million practice? Because just because you have $1 million in revenue doesn't mean you have $1 million in the bank, right? So often when I'm working with clients, it's like, well, my friend down the road has 2 clinics, so I want 2 clinics, or this person over here has a rental property, so I want a rental property. And it's like that whole point of like, are you actually chasing something you want because it's truly your soul's desire, or because you've been convinced that that's what you want? You've been convinced that these things are important and you should need them. And Ryan, you and I also connected over our love of bougie things.
Yes,
There's
I
nothing.
noticed your Gucci slides that you picked up in the
There's
lunch break of this mastermind.
You're like, Steph, those are nice shoes. Yeah. So like there's nothing wrong with achieving success in desiring some of these nice things, but like by no means is my identity attached to those Gucci slides. And if I lose them or I break them, then I'm less than because nobody can see the GG emblem, you know? And
Mhm.
I think for so many people, especially in entrepreneurship, because we just have a little bit more control over our destiny when we're creating this business and this lifestyle, is we start chasing shit we don't even want, that we don't even care about, but we think the moment we get it, it's going to make a difference.
1000%. Steph, I'd love to ask you, what was the amount of money that you started making that didn't actually change your happiness at all?
Oh, that is such a good question. So I think I was thinking about this the other day, and I think that when you're building, and this is profit, I'm not talking revenue because
Mhm.
revenue is just like such a funny thing that it might have no weight to it at all. If we're talking about legit income, I started to feel my life to change when my income was 10K a month.
Mhm.
And I started to not really worry about paying for rent, didn't worry about like going out to dinner. We could go out to dinner a couple times, groceries, all of that. Granted, it was just Kyle and I, but I remember being like, wow, this is a good amount of money. I could live a good life on this. And then I think when we really grew, I think the higher up we got to, 40, 50K months of income between the two of us, anything past that hasn't really changed our lifestyle. It hasn't, because it's not like we're using that to sustain our lifestyle, right? We're using that to go in and buy different things, buy assets, save up, build a legacy, that sort of thing. So that's just my off the cuff answer. But yeah, I think my first milestone was like 10K a month. I was like, okay, wow, this is an amazing life. And I'm curious. I want you to tell me why you asked
Yeah.
that question. But also, that's another such a good point, because what's the difference between a $700,000 practice and $1 million practice? Honestly, probably $250,000 in expenses.
Yeah. So what we can really get from your answer, and it's also the same for me, is once you've hit that initial milestone and most of your all of your basic needs are covered, so you can go out and do the things you want to do, and you don't have to look at the price of the steak
Totally.
on the
Yeah, you're not
menu.
worried about getting gas, or like you can get the organic groceries.
Exactly. Then everything else on top is just cream. It's just a bonus. It's a nice to have. And if it wasn't there, it doesn't change your life dramatically. So having the nice things, I remember living in Sydney for a period of time. And when I was studying down there, I think I would walk through the CBD and see every second woman with a Louis Vuitton handbag. So in my head, for the 3 months I was there, I'm like, I'm going to get the male equivalent, little satchel bag that I can put on my waist. And I remember going in and buying it and being excited. And then I never took it out because I felt like a complete wanker next to my friends. And secondly, it was impractical for me because it couldn't fit all my shit in. So I sold it like 6 months later for a third of the price. And I learned that, wow, I just did that to make myself feel good and it didn't do anything for my happiness. Now, do I have other LV stuff? Yes. So the point is not the bag. It was actually recognizing what was the thing that I truly wanted versus what's all the other BS, all the other
Yep.
crap that we try to buy or try to chase to
To make
look
us feel a
good.
certain way. Yeah. I was
Yeah.
just having this discussion with a client the other day, because she's like, I always said that I was going to get a Louis Vuitton handbag when I hit X amount in business. And we were talking about like programming your neurology, and like you do have to reward yourself, because if you're just working for nothing, like if you were to a regular job, you would get bonuses, you would get promotions. When you're working for yourself, that doesn't happen. And she was like, I always said, and I would never pull the trigger. So I want to set a new goal so that when I hit it in this new business, I can get that handbag. And I was like, but what if you're just not motivated by a handbag? Like, what if instead of spending 3K on a bag, you actually want a 3K vacation to the Bahamas? Or I don't even know if you can go to the Bahamas for 3K anymore, but anywhere like Mexico, whatever it is, like say you wanted a 3K vacation to Mexico instead, and that is actually what your soul desires. And who cares if
Mm,
you ever threw it on Instagram, you know? And she was like, you know, I think you're right. It's because I'm truly not motivated. So I never pulled the trigger. And
yeah.
it's like, if we could just ask ourselves questions like that, like, what is going to light you up and get you excited? Because there are things like I love an experience and I love being at a nice hotel. I love having a fancy glass of champagne. That feels like success to me. And I can tap into creativity and abundance and all of the good things in the world and gratitude when I feel like my best self. But that doesn't mean that I don't feel great laying in like a swimsuit cover up on the beach, like getting pounded with sand from my son. You know, there's multiple
Yeah,
experiences we could have, but knowing that about yourself, what truly motivates you and what truly is going to get you excited is super important.
absolutely. And that's that's the level of self-awareness that if you have, and you can continually come back and check in with yourself around, cool, what is it that I'm desiring in this moment? And being in the thought process, it's actually distinguishing, is this something I want, or is this to fit a particular mold or image or feel good enough? That level of questioning, when you get to the, oh, I want it because I want it and I don't need to justify it and I don't need the explanation
Mm-hmm.
as to why, that's when we're really honest with ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
I used to trade crypto a lot, and in the crypto groups that always talk about, when I make all this money from crypto, I'm going to buy a Lamborghini. And that's what everyone comments, Lambo, Lambo, Lambo. I'm like, are you serious? Have you guys
That's
sat
what
in a
you're going to do.
Lamborghini? It is super uncomfortable. If you have any muscle or you've got any weight, getting in and out of that thing is a pain in the ass. Like, doesn't drive very well. I'd much prefer a Ferrari. So it's just really interesting
that
how
that
people
that was like the in that community. And that's the thing too, certain communities value certain things. And so like if you're immersing yourself into a new community or a new mastermind or something, and they're valuing all these things, like you have to know yourself pretty well to be like, wow, do I actually value that too, or am I just essentially modeling what it is that they value?
And then we take that exact same principle with the self-awareness for ourselves and we take it into our businesses. And I think you're questioning to your client about, why does she want the $1 million practice? What does that instinctively do for her life? Is that conducive to what she wants to step into? And as you said, if the growth between $750,000 and $1 million is actually just more expenses, do you want that overhead? Do you want that stress? Um, for most people, when they really get honest with themselves, the answer is no.
And some of them, and I'm not saying this for this client, but just even for myself, I've had to ask myself, like, is more better? And why do I want more? And what is it that I'm chasing? Is it just more revenue, because that doesn't equate to more income? And is it in the name of being busy? Because we could do a million things to be busy. I could open a new business every day if I wanted to be busier. And so asking yourself, if like, does that really align with where I'm headed and where I want to go? And I think that that's honestly a perfect segue into the next thing that I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, because I know you love systems. I know you love creating systems within businesses. And so, for my listeners in particular, most of them, as you know, are service based entrepreneurs.
Mhm.
What are some systems that you think that if they implemented in their business, maybe like the number one system that you see people kind of lacking, that if they implemented, it would really change how their business flows and even the trajectory of their business?
Honestly, I think the most valuable system for a service-based business to have is an incredible onboarding and offboarding process. So the onboarding process for any client is all the mapping out all the different touch points that a client experiences from the moment they book an appointment, but it even starts before that. So how do they experience you on socials? How do they experience you in Facebook Messenger through your business page? What is the
Mm-hmm.
language? Is it consistent throughout? When someone books the very first appointment and you know that they're new to your clinic, how are you then following up with them? Not just an automated email, but is there a way that you can personalize it? Is there a way for that person to feel warm and invited, um, and like excited to walk through your doors?
Absolutely.
Once they have their very first appointment, is there a discount? Is there a follow-up comms? Is there feedback? And then being able to collect the feedback. If it's anything less than 5 stars, well, that's really insightful. And there might be a personalized follow-up to understand why. And if
Mm-hmm.
someone has rated your business 5 stars, then can we prompt that person to leave a Google review for the
Mm-hmm.
business?
And I think that that is so important that you mentioned too. Like, if they don't view what service you just provided as 5 stars and you can figure out why, so many people are scared of that reason why. They don't want the criticism or the negative feedback. But it's like if you just go in with an open mind and you're like, but yeah, if I have that data, I can actually do something about it.
Absolutely. And if you have that data across multiple patients, that's a piece of knowledge that you now have about your business and the experience that you didn't have before.
Totally.
And so trying to patch where things are manual at the moment. And so if you have an administrative person on your team who is manually following up with people, that is a cost to the business.
Mm-hmm.
The admin person should be freed up to do other more important work and take stuff off the business owner's plate. Um, and really looking at what are the things that are manual and repetitive in my business that I either don't enjoy doing, don't have time to do, right? Or it's just a heavy cost
Yeah,
and
that's what I
getting
was going to
clear on
say.
what
It's a
that is.
huge cost in order to do that part.
Absolutely. And then recognizing, cool, well, the investment into building out the system or working with someone to map that out is the ROI on that is not just in the time saved by the admin person. It's actually heightened because all of your clients who are coming into your practice have an overall better experience and it's memorable. And it's the same way that when you think of a fizzy drink, you think of Coca-Cola or Pepsi.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because they've done such a great job at being in your head. So you imagine taking up rent in your patient's head so that every time they thought about seeing a chiropractor or the podiatrist or the orthodontist or whoever it is, that you were front and center, that they were going back to you every time from the first moment. And if we take this seriously enough and we over deliver on our experience, then that person, that new client who comes into the business, becomes a walking, talking billboard, free
Absolutely.
marketing forever.
Absolutely. A raving fan, right? We just in the mastermind last week, it's so timely that you brought this up. In the mastermind last week, we went over never lose a customer again and how we could improve our retention by implementing some of those processes. And it's everything that you're saying right now. Like it starts with the first impression, right? Like you have, especially in today's world, you have one chance to get it right. And if you do not get it right, your business will feel that. And also, something that reminded me of one of my experiences in the clinic as you were talking is nothing is a bigger compliment than a patient who maybe leaves because they want something cheaper or they want to use their insurance and you don't take their insurance. And then they come back 2 months later and are like, yeah, it wasn't the same experience. And it's like, exactly. That's why we charge differently, is because we're providing a different experience. And by no means, I've never wanted to be the office that is the most expensive in town. It's just not. I want to be reimbursed for the value I provide, and I want it to still be affordable to an extent to the patient. You know, I don't want it to be just like, hey, you can't afford this for your family, because I believe the service we deliver within our office is so beneficial. At the same time, like you are paying for an experience. And if you just want to be thrown on the table and adjusted in a minute, then you can leave. That's not what we do at our office. And so even anybody listening to this, giving and having the confidence essentially to be like, hey, if I can dial in my experience and my onboarding process, that gives me permission to just do things differently and charge differently for that.
Mm-hmm. So then where this gets really fun. So my background is in product and user experience design on the web. But how I like to think about this in the practical world, especially with service-based businesses who have a brick and mortar location, is looking at dining experiences and hotel experiences and bringing those elements into a practice. So
Absolutely.
psychologically, we are then evaluating a space when we walk in, and then the really fun part in terms of elevating a whole experience is how can you engage all of the 5 senses from the very first moment they open the door. What do they smell? What do they see? What's on offer? What's the language of your staff? Sometimes it comes down to how comfortable is the chair to sit in so that they're not thinking about, man, I'm waiting 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Um, and it's all those little elements. It's
To
the
add to the,
fresh
yep.
flowers. Absolutely. And then the clever thing is, how do we design that whole experience where it feels like $1 million on a dime,
Yeah,
and
totally.
and spending where we need to spend. um like Abercrombie and Fitch always would have, they've got their own
Mhm.
fragrance in the store, and music would be blasted at a particular volume, and what that meant and what it signaled to the brain was that young people under 25 would actually spend more money because their brain was stimulated by the music and the scent in the store.
Yes, yes, at the same time.
Yeah,
Yeah, and so it's the culmination of all those little things together that can really add to the overall experience. I love that. And I know sometimes you're like, well, how do I know what they're going to like? Well, you can pull them, right? You can pull your ideal clients and be like, what is your favorite scent? And what is your favorite hotel? And one of the things that I shared recently was like, if the Four Seasons is emailing me before I show up at my booking and my reservation and they want to know all my favorite things, why aren't you doing that for your patients? Why don't you want to know what their favorite drink is, their favorite scent, their favorite pillow, if they have any food allergies? That's obviously applicable for a hotel, but like, what are some things that you could ask for your particular business to figure out, like, okay, if they really like this, I can amplify this.
absolutely. I mean, how much does an orange or lime cost?
Right.
Like a couple of slices of that in the water that they can pour for themselves is like that slight bit of elevation above, okay, I'm going to put this plastic cup underneath the water cooler.
Totally. Totally. Such a different experience. And if there's one thing I know about you, you love the experience with your in person events that you host. I'm going to have to make it to one sometime soon. But I'm so excited that you're going to be here in August for my
Yes.
event. I'm so excited for us to dive into launching a legacy together. As we round up here and as we close out, there's one thing that I love to ask all of my guests, and that is, what does wealthy mean to you?
I love this question. How I've come to define it for myself is that wealth is not another income level, but it's an identity. And we get to choose whether we're a wealthy person or not. And wealth isn't always money. You can be rich in time, you can be rich in happiness and joy and moments. And recognizing that we can be wealthy in this moment then means that we get to craft and choose our life experience all the time. Money then becomes the amplification of what we're already experiencing, but it doesn't fundamentally change who we are because we've already got it. So for me, it's like, cool, well, I've already won. I
Yes.
get to employ my sister in my business, get to work with my family, get to do shit on my schedule. I work with the most baller clients ever. I get to travel, come and see you. Like, I've already won. Everything
Yes.
else on top is just a bonus. And maybe deepening that answer a little bit, the way I see it is, if I am still 6 feet above ground, I'm not dead, I'm not in a coffin, everything has upside. And
Everything
so,
is figure outable.
absolutely, which means, therefore, for me, I can still choose to create wealthy moments right now that's
Absolutely.
detached from money.
I love that. Yeah. And that's me too. Like, I wealthy, yes, I want to create a legacy and live this beautiful lifestyle and, leave a beautiful legacy for my son. But wealthy to me has little to do with money and has a lot to do with feeling. And can I feel wealthy in this moment? I love that perspective that you have. And it's so good. I don't feel like I need to add to it because you nailed it. So thank you so much for joining me. And I am so excited to see you soon.
My pleasure, Steph. Thank you so much for having me on today.